One of the most important things in my life is art. From music to movies to stories of any kind, the consumption of art is one of the many constants in my life. Art is so important to everyday life, more than you know. The fact that people who don't even exist or sounds coming from a guitar is able to make us feel such strong emotions is so incredibly important. Simple stories and fairy tales are able to teach children right from wrong. A character going through similar struggles as your own makes them feel relatable to you, and you're able to feel those emotions and get through those hard times. Art is a teacher. Art is a healer. Art is a distractor. Art can be anything you want it to be. So why is art that does all of these things so hard to make? Well, if we're going to answer this question, you have to go to the source of the art, the artist. Artists are in a very precarious position when it comes to making their art. Take a shot every time I see art. I guarantee you'll die. Artists are there to bring up all of their experiences, knowledge, and emotions and put it all into one medium. Whether that medium be writing, storytelling, two things that we're going to talk a lot about in this video. Music, painting, anything of the sort. Trying to put all of those elements into one piece of art is incredibly difficult to do. Well, that's not entirely true. It is incredibly difficult to do well. Many artists can put all of their feelings and ideas into a piece of art, and it turns out like a piece of shit. The main role of the artist is to convey what they are trying to say or get across to the audience in an enlightening and entertaining way, while you're trying to have your art seem out of the people, that is. But nobody tells you that doing that is very hard and takes a ton of discipline and practice. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's just like one of my favorite quotes from a world-renowned artist.
Like when you started?
Of course. Do you think I came out the pussy drawing fucking Mozart?
I do.
Every artist tries to make the best piece of art that they can. Well, some of them do. Most do it for the money or to make companies happy. But you can blame good old late-stage capitalism for that. But for the artists who are actually trying to say something with their art, they know the road is long and treacherous and will most likely lead to ruin. But they do it anyways, and they do it so many times that they eventually create a masterpiece. That's what I want to talk about in this video, about why art makes us feel the way that we do, and why masterpieces don't just fall out of thin air. So my dear viewers, sit back, relax, as I explain why you'll never make your masterpiece. Yet. Now this begs the question of what a masterpiece is in the first place. Well, in my opinion, a masterpiece is a piece of art that the artist put all of their experience in the medium and outside of it in order to create artwork that speaks to the souls of people. It has nothing to do with logic, nothing to do with equations or rationality, just how through the art and the emotions that you feel, it changes you, and you are not the same person that you were when you first went into that piece of art. Has that ever happened to you? That has happened to me plenty of times throughout my life, where I feel better having experienced a piece of art than had I not. And I know I said I was going to focus more on storytelling a lot in this video, and I am, but before we get to that, I want to give a music example first. To me, music is pure emotion expressed through sound. Of all of the mediums of art that I peruse, music is the one that makes me the most emotional. Music touches the soul like no other. It can take you to many different places, from dealing with the darkest of emotions, the feelings of transcendence and transformation. One piece of music that I consider to be a masterpiece, definitely in the emotional camp, at least for me, is the album Disintegration by The Cure. Every time I listen to this album, every single time, these feelings just well up inside of me, and I just can't get enough of it. While the music is absolutely stunning and beautiful, they also provide the perfect backdrop for the lyrics of this album, which makes me the most emotional. Songs like Untitled, Disintegration, Pictures of You, Plain Song all sound incredible, but the lyrics draw me in just as much. This is the first time that I can recall where I fully related to the lyrics of an album because they mirrored my experiences and thoughts. Now, I have certainly related to lyrics and songs before listening to this album. While I was painting vivid pictures of what it is like to live in New York City on Illmatic, another masterpiece by the way, has certainly reminded me of what it was like for me living in the city. But no album has ever comforted me in my feelings of sadness and anxiety like Disintegration has. The lyrics,
never quite said what I wanted to say to you, never quite managed the words to explain to you, never quite knew how to make them believable. Now the time has gone, another time undone.
song Untitled blew me away because never have I heard a singer of a band portray social anxiety and nervousness like that before. It really cuts down to how it really feels when you can't convey your feelings to other people and the hurt it can bring to yourself and others. That's just one lyric from one song off of this album, and I can name many others. All of this to say, to me, The Cure's Disintegration has changed my life and how I perceive feeling my emotions. If I ever want to get in touch with my feelings, I just put on this album, and it's incredibly therapeutic, at least for me. Now, throughout that description of Disintegration, I'm sure you've noticed that I kept saying the words "to me" and "in my opinion," because, well, it is my opinion. A masterpiece is not really an objective thing. And if you notice in my definition, I said that masterpieces are not about logic or rationality. It's about emotion. What's more subjective than personal emotions, right? I'm positive that there are people who hate Disintegration, or any of the pieces of art that I will bring up later in this video. They might think that a piece of art that I'm not a fan of is an incredible classic. So while these definitions aren't definitive, it means the words change all the time, what is real is how a piece of art made you feel, and that is the main focus. Did this piece of art change you in any way? That's what's actually important. To me, storytelling is one of the highest forms of art. We as humans need stories. They are so important when it comes to developing who we are as people. They can teach us right from wrong. They can teach us what to do in certain situations. They even shape us as people. Stories affect our personalities, how we think about ourselves, how we think about others. All of these things stem from the simple act of telling a story. I believe the best stories, the masterpieces, are stories that change us for the better, where we can take the themes and the messages that are being explored in the story into our own lives. If a story can affect you on that much of a personal level, then I think it deserves to be called a masterpiece, in my opinion at least. At the end of the day, storytelling serves to teach us how to deal with and be a reflection of the human condition. Since ancient times, mythological stories were used for such reasons, to be a reflection of the world and of the people. That is why we need them so much. There are several stories in different mediums that I consider to be masterpieces. One of my favorite films of all time is Ingmar Bergman's The Seventh Seal, where our main character Antonius Block is a knight in a failed crusade. When he returns back home, we see him wrestle with his wavering faith in God, and alongside having a personification of death follow him around and play chess with him. This film is incredible for many reasons. The cinematography is brilliant, the acting is killer, the story itself is incredibly intriguing. But when it comes down to how the themes of the film are enhanced not just through the dialogue, but the framing and cinematography, it really brings everything together. Main themes of the film are dealing with the loss of faith and dealing with one's own mortality. So many scenes and shot choices in those scenes convey this theme perfectly. Like the scene where the woman is about to be burned at the stake. The stark shadows over the whole scene really makes it feel like death is watching over them, and plays into her speech about seeing darkness all around her when she dies. That the afterlife is nothing but darkness. Or the final scene of the film, which I won't spoil, but is easily one of the most harrowing scenes I have ever seen in a film. Everything about the filmmaking itself is made to enhance the story being told, and the themes that are being explored. And this is just one example of something like this. Another one of my all-time favorite stories is a manga called Ashita no Joe. It is a story about Joe Yabuki, an orphan wanderer going through the slums of post-World War II Japan. In his travels, Joe happens upon this old drunk named Danpei. Joe ends up getting in a fight and shows off just how good he is at kicking ass. This intrigues Danpei because he used to be a boxing coach, and he sees a bright new star in boxing with Joe. This setup leads to one of the most impactful stories I have ever read, and is easily a masterpiece without a doubt. Ashita no Joe is a character study of our main character Joe Yabuki. At the beginning of the story, he is hot-headed, brash, and just filled to the brim with attitude. But after several experiences with other people in and outside of the boxing ring, Joe learns what he actually needed in his life was companionship. Joe was alone most of his life, leading him not to trust other people. But as Joe lets people in and he learns from them, and even though he struggles and fights with himself and to survive, he does so with a clearer mind and a bigger heart. Ashitano Joe is about how through hard work and having good people around you, you can become a better person, and you can fight knowing that people are going to be on your side. These two stories, that I consider to be masterpieces, are the culmination of years of work and learning. These impactful stories and thought-provoking themes didn't just pop up out of the blue overnight. Ingmar Bergman created many films before making The Seventh Seal. Iki Kajiwara and Tetsuya Chiba both made several different manga before coming together to make Ashita no Joe. And I'm sure they've been honing their respective skills for years before ever writing a script or drawing a character for the manga. I'm sure Bergman directed several films just to get better at his craft before making some of his best work. This is the part that most people don't tell you about when it comes to making art. It takes lots and lots of practice to make anything even remotely interesting. Practice and discipline, huh? Doesn't sound very fun. But this is actually the best part when it comes to making art. The exploration phase. During this period of practice, this is where you find your voice as an artist. This is where you find out what speaks to you, and how to actually put all those elements together to make something worthwhile. While this may be the most interesting part of the art making process, it is also the hardest and most discouraging. Because what if you try out an idea and it doesn't work out at all? All of that time and effort you put into that piece of art, it kind of feels like you did it all for nothing. That feeling is what stops a lot of artists from starting their work and their art in the first place. Fear of being bad. The fear of failure. Failure is difficult to go through, especially when it comes to the creative field like creating art. Learning from those failures is what makes you a better artist. It tells you what you need to work on and what you may not need when it comes to your art. Practicing your medium consistently over and over again until you're competent in it is a very hard hurdle to get over when you're an artist, especially when you have expectations of creating something that will actually work out. The expectation of creating art like the piece of art that inspired you in the first place. This is a big obstacle for me personally. I know I have to write a bunch of stories in order to write one that even touches one of the ones that inspired me in the first place. No writer, no matter how skilled, is going around writing Legend of the Galactic Heroes, or Harakiri, or Taxi Driver on the first try. So why would I expect myself to do the same? I think the main reason as to why that is because they're comparing your own art to the art that inspires you. Yeah, comparison is the thief of joy. Trying to compare your own art to your inspirations is a surefire way of never doing your art again. It's good to have a goal of where you want to be with your storytelling or whatever medium of art that you're in. But to be in constant competition with your inspirations just kills any motivations you may have to improve in your field. Speaking of competition, if we're really being honest with each other here, it's really not fair to compare yourself to your inspirations anyway. Because more often than not, your inspirations have had way more experience in that field than you ever had. So even if you're working on something for months or years, they still have many more years over you. Now that's not to say that you'll never get on their level, because that's always possible if you put the work in. But don't try and compete with people who aren't even in your league. I'm sure your inspiration has had inspirations themselves, and have taken the time to work on their craft in order to be like them. But in all honesty, that might take longer than you think. Artists who have created masterpieces typically have worked on tons of different pieces of art before that, and have worked on those pieces of art for a long time. One of my favorite storytellers and one of my biggest inspirations is Osamu Tezuka. He created one of my favorite stories of all time with his manga Phoenix, a collection of stories that feature the titular phoenix, an immortal bird that can grant immortal life to those who drink its blood. The stories go back and forth in time from the far past to the far future, telling different philosophically intriguing stories along the way. Tezuka first started creating this manga in 1967, with some early drafts dating all the way back to the 50s. This manga didn't just pop up out of nowhere. Tezuka was creating manga for a little over 20 years before starting to work on Phoenix, what he considered to be his life's work. As most people know, Tezuka was incredibly prolific. and went on to create hundreds of different manga series. In order to create his best work, he had to go through years and years of, well, making his art. This goes to every great artist in every field. They make tons of art before even getting to the very first pieces of art that will be available for audiences to see. Then work on a ton of those, then eventually make something amazing. Akira Kurosawa made a ton of films for years before making Seven Samurai or Rashomon. Picasso made hundreds of drawings and paintings before making Guernica or The Weeping Woman. Prince, ever since he was young, has practiced and made many songs and albums before making Purple Rain or 1999. It takes a long time to make your best work. And to be honest, that thought is a bit terrifying. You think about the mountain of work you have to do in order to get to where you want to be, and that's an incredibly paralyzing thought. You wouldn't want to start at all if you knew that. But instead of focusing on the top of the mountain, you should focus on the mountain itself and just start climbing. But what does climbing that mountain even look like? Well, obviously it starts with practicing your art, but that's not all that goes into it. I'm sure you heard the phrase, art imitates life, or life imitates art. That usually means that something that happened in a piece of art is reflective of something that happens in real life, and vice versa. But when it comes to the creation of art, I take these phrases in a different way. The way I see it, in order to create interesting art, a masterpiece if you will, you have to not only work on your craft, but you must also live life outside of your art. Going out and actually seeing things in the world, experiencing new things, meeting new people, will make your art even more interesting and relatable than it might have already been. Getting inspiration from other pieces of art is great, but that's not the only piece of the puzzle where you should get your inspiration from. Look out into the world. Get inspiration from your own experiences. Try to find ways to have new experiences so that what you make is not only a reflection of what inspires you, it is a reflection of you. Try to have new experiences. Try to create opportunities to have new experiences in your everyday life. I know how difficult that can be when you have responsibilities weighing down on you. Life during late-stage capitalism is incredibly challenging, but try to manage your time and be creative in finding ways to maybe push yourself outside of your comfort zone. Having life experience to draw from, no pun intended, is so important when it comes to making art that has a unique voice. Your voice. Figuring this out is going to make climbing that mountain so much easier. Art is a journey. Creating art is a process. While difficult and discouraging, can lead to some of the most rewarding achievements you will ever have. Even if one person reads your story, or watches your film, or listens to your song, and it affects them in some way, that, my dear viewers, is a feeling like no other. So go out there, my fellow artists, and do what we do best. Connect with others. That's kind of what art is all about. Sharing your ideas and emotions with others. You may never create your masterpiece, but climbing that mountain is just as important and is just as fulfilling. So keep on climbing, and who knows, maybe I'll see you at the top one day. That's been enough from me, my dear viewers. I want to say thank you so much for watching this video. I truly do appreciate it. If you're an artist, I hope you get something from this video. And if you aren't, I hope you learn just a little bit of what it's like being a creative. Send this video out to all of your creative friends. Maybe they'll get something from it too. Tune in next time for something completely different. Peace.